Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. We have quite a few folks on Zoom with the threats of bad weather again. Um, Good to see you. So it's been 2 weeks since our last meeting, where the industry shared some of their challenges and our state agencies talked about, what they were doing to facilitate, to help people comply, et cetera, and some of the challenges. So we know a little bit about where we are now. So it's like a recap of um, going over a little bit of the information because there's a few clarifications I know I would like. And also, are there other ways that we can be helping the industry to comply? What are still some of those challenges? So with that, I welcome everyone. Do you want to say a welcome, Mary?
Nice to be here.
And Rep. Belinsky, would you like to say a few words as co-chair of the working group?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just happy to be here and hope that we are moving in the right direction and let's rock and roll.
Okay, thank you. Um, so I'll start with the first question, and I'd like to ask Nicole Goldbaum. I think you're on Zoom.
Yes, Representative, I'm here.
Hi, how are you?
Sure.
Um, in the period of time, it's been a couple of years since the bill was passed, even though it's been worked on for quite a while. Do you have a count of how many nursing homes have reached out to you in your department to with questions, concerns, et cetera, and and that you have been able to help?
Yes, Representative. As we had discussed in our last group meeting regarding, we were able to work directly with Steve Vera and with his buildings. So we have had agreements put in place for most of his buildings that have 3 and 4 bedded rooms. We just received this week a letter and a request from iCare. So we're currently in process of reviewing that, and we'll be reaching out to them and to work through the details regarding. And then I believe Savita was the last organization that had 3 and 4 bedded rooms, and I believe last they mentioned they were in process of developing a plan and would be working through that and reaching out to us.
Okay, great. So how many do we have that have 3 and 4 bedrooms?
I am not sure if the Department of Public Health is there. I know in our last meeting, Barbara Cass had presented an not a scientific estimate, but an estimate of what we think is out there based off of a survey that we had conducted several years ago. So we think we have, I believe the number was around 20 or 30 buildings, but don't hold me to that. I'm not sure if DPH is there to answer that.
Okay. Pardon? Oh, yes, Barbara. I'm sorry.
Good morning, Representative Garibay. So last presentation, we identified, and thank you, Nicole, for indicating that it's not scientific. This is data that we've collected from a variety of resources. But it appears that we have, plus or minus, I'm going to use 10%, 691 beds. And it appears as if we have 16 facilities of our 191 facilities that have some configuration of a 3 and 4 bedroom.
Okay, thank you for that. Um, a comment at the last meeting, there was one that um, said that it was taking DPH 1 to 2 years to get information out and help some of these facilities. I know each facility probably has different needs, so it may take different time lengths to help them. But have you had anyone in your knowledge that has waited that long to get help from the state agencies?
So I think we would need a little more information to respond as accurately as we can. But I do know in talking with our life safety coach supervisor, who does have oversight for all the plan reviews. He has indicated that he has been in contact with all of the corporations that presented at our last meeting. In terms of taking 1 to 2 years, I think that each project is independent of the next. And I don't have knowledge of 1 to 2 years, but I'd like more information about that. And my experience has been that there's good communication between the industry and with the Life Safety Code unit when there is plan review done. And it's a comprehensive review where we have often discussion with architects. And I know in the Savita case, we had been in touch with Michelle, with Jay Pepper from Savita. And again, if there are any concerns, we would always encourage the corporation facility to reach out to us. And again, the supervisor's often in the field, but there is a structure at DPH where they can reach out to the section chief, the manager, and it's not unusual for people to reach out to me as well to get answers and to get things moving if there's a perceived delay.
Rep. Polinsky?
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Rep. Garabay and co-chair. My less of a question and more of a comment. The purpose of this working group is to mediate and facilitate what we can do. So, if there's any stakeholders involved that, need to, speak offline about any of this stuff, they should feel free to do so. And we're happy to again step into that mediation role. I don't expect that there will be, but on the chance that there might be, it's important that you know that we're not slamming any doors anywhere here at this point. What we want is cooperation amongst all our parties. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So my next question was to look over here. What can we do better? How can we help more? How do we get anyone who hasn't already been reached out to, although it seems like, many of them have been. What can we do to help facilitate this transition?
Well, thank you, Representative Garibay. And I also want to particularly thank you for the environment that you created at our last meeting, where I think we were able to have a very candid and productive conversation. And it led to Representative Belinsky's really salient comment that with dialogue, it sort of exposed that there was more commonality than what separated us on these issues, and a clear goal and not a recalcitrance from the industry to move towards transitioning to the 2-bedroom limitations. And so very grateful to you for creating that environment and giving us the opportunity to be heard. Our nursing home representatives on the work group are prepared to briefly, and I want to emphasize briefly, sort of like go one by one in terms of the progress that's been made, even since the last meeting, because we somewhat viewed the last meeting, and especially Representative Belinsky's comments, as kind of a call or a request to let's keep moving on this. And so there's been good movement even since our last meeting. And they're prepared to do that. But to your point on the last question, what more can be done? We do have some policy items that maybe we can raise after our representatives speak briefly. And they principally center around the discussions about things that might need to be waived and a willingness to waive certain things. And in the event that some of those waivers were statutory, the idea that we might need, and I'm ahead of myself, but we might need a statutory construction by the end of this session regarding waivers, perhaps a notwithstanding type of clause type of thing. But in any event, with your permission, I'll just introduce Steve and we'll go through our list real quickly again.
Sure.
Thank you again for the opportunity to speak, Representative Garibay. Stephen Vera, Wachusett Healthcare, Chief Executive Officer. I think you've heard that we have been in front of the curve and working with Nicole, and we remain fully committed to this. We believe that getting the rooms to two-bed max capacity is important to our industry. Um, the thing that I'm waiting on now is just the final settlement on a building that I'm working on Nicole with. I think as she had indicated that there was one left in review, and I'm just waiting on that. And then, we've already started plans on how we're going to do this. As I spoke about last time, though, we have to remember this is really going to happen through attrition. And it is going to take time. And I think it's important that everyone here understands that. But I would tell you, I know certainly for myself, I don't want to speak for Denise and Michael, but I'm certain that they are as committed as I am to this. So the last thing I am waiting on, and then we are settled, would be the final facility settlement with DSS. And Nicole is actively working on that.
Yeah, I think that attrition piece is just important. I think the industry has to realize that we're not trying to end up with patients or clients that don't have a bed. We set deadlines in this to make the plans because we know the planning. I mean, I was a city council person for 8 years before I came here, and when you do a project, it's the planning that takes forever, and then the project itself, it may go much quicker again once you have that attrition that you need to do the plan. So I think the attrition is in there purposefully because we know that we can't just disrupt the whole system to get this done, but that attrition will allow us to do it over time and eventually. In other words, I think the statute was crafted that way. So I don't think anyone on this side of the table doesn't understand the attrition piece.
Right. And from my perspective, the last thing we want to do is create a bed shortage for expediency's sake.
Thank you. Steve, do you know if you, as a group, have reached out to other partners? Because I understand most of the other New England states have already done this several years, in past years before us. Is there anything that through your counterparts there that we can learn about how they facilitated or how they did? I don't know if, Matt, you have done that. Um,
Yeah, I've talked considerably with my Massachusetts colleague, but early on they were very much in a very contentious position. I would characterize it as with the policy because they viewed it perhaps as a takings of their property without just compensation for it. Because and so I think their initial statutory construction was different than the one we passed in
right, but so
Connecticut.
you have reached out and you understand the way they did it, so maybe we're doing better.
Well, I think we're working more cooperatively in an
Right.
incremental way. And the last I knew, and I'll have to get back to you, Representative, on the update of this, but there was litigation in Massachusetts regarding the rule. And I'm sorry, I don't know the exact status of that, but we may very well end up ahead of them if they were in front of us because they had passed their law perhaps 2 years earlier than we did.
Well, and we thank everyone in this room and around the table for working together, for that. Um, a question, I'll save it. I have another one for Matt, but I'll save it for afterwards. But thank you, Steve, for that update.
Just to add to that litigation, it was a consortium of providers. I don't remember 6 or 8 that came together, and it really threw the brakes on some of their moving forward. So I would agree with Matt's comments, and I believe that litigation is still active and slowly moving through the court system. But I would say that we are certainly working more collaboratively in Connecticut.
Which benefits all our residents, so we appreciate that. Rep. Belinsky.
I too say thank you to Steve. That was a very a good status check. And I just for the sake of tackling one of the biggest elephants in the room, everybody on this work group is um, far along in understanding that Connecticut is not one of the most reliable Medicaid reimbursers in the world, and that we have a tendency to rush ourselves to other priorities rather than taking the time to keep up with things like inflation with our Medicaid payments. And that's an ongoing battle that we have no disagreement on both sides of the aisle, in this legislature about the fact that we need to put a little bit more prioritization into making sure that we're doing what we can to keep you guys whole.
Chairperson Garabay, if I could.
Thank you, Rep. Polinsky. Claudio?
Thank you. I just want to make sure, just for the record and purposes of transparency, that we're all clear operating on the same facts, because there seemed to be some insinuation that this is a live legal issue. So I just want to set the record straight that Maine was one of the first states in New England to do this in 1994, not a live legal matter there. Massachusetts, yes, was the most recent in 2022, but we also have New Hampshire, 2011, more than 15 years ago now, Rhode Island several years ago, and Vermont 2018. So, and in fact, I think maybe Nicole or Barbara will speak on even new federal guidance at CMS saying they're not tolerating and wanting to see these 3 and 4 bed configurations. So I think the law is very, very well settled. That this is a legal thing to do, and the direction at both the state and federal level is certainly to move in that direction. So I want to bracket the Massachusetts conversation.
If I could just briefly respond, Representative Gary, there's no disagreement whatsoever. I hope you understand in a clear way. We're not legally challenging moving in the 2-bedroom direction. I was trying to be responsive to our closest neighbor who did have a litigation strategy. We are not moving in that direction. We're moving in a completely different direction, but I appreciate your comments.
We want to avoid the worst, so thank you. Thank you. Okay, anything else, Steve?
Not at this time, but thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Denise Quarles from Savita Healthcare. Just wanted to say that we have made much progress since the last meeting. Thank you. This meeting is helpful, and I just want to reiterate that I am also in full agreement that the 2 bedrooms are the most favorable condition for quality care for our residents. We're still evaluating, and I'll explain a little bit why, but progress has been made. A reminder for Savita that our goal is to keep as many beds as possible. Again, we have 50 beds at Milford that are affected. We also just newly acquired 2 homes that also we've identified having the issue. So Sheridan Woods in Bristol has 2 beds, and Salmon Brook and Glastonbury 4 beds. So again, those are newly acquired. So we are evaluating a plan. And the reason why we're in a little bit of a quandary still is, but we're making progress, is one, in evaluating if a transfer of beds are possible, there is a legislative about critical access areas where you can't just obviously transfer beds. There has to be like 97% occupancy within a 15-mile radius. So one of our first steps is our consultant, Steve Bernier, does have a meeting with ourselves as well with Nicole next week. And we're going to evaluate if there's a possibility for a waiver of that statute, because that's going to tell all if transfer is even an option or not. Secondly, I had shared at the last meeting that we had submitted previous architectural plans for our Milford facility, which to Tony Bruno, which was declined because basically of the physical constraints of the room sizes. So if it was even feasible or not. But since our last meeting, we have gotten 3 more plans, and they were just submitted to Life Safety this week. So understandably, we haven't heard back yet. But again, it's really going to decide, because if we can transfer beds, that'll be great. If the new designs are accepted, we would only have to transfer 24 beds to Cheshire versus 50. So that is also would be best. We could keep as many beds at Milford as possible, and then, only transfer those 24. So again, we need to know about the waiver from DSS. We have to see if the architectural plans are accepted. And then we can really make a decision. We'd like to keep as many beds at Milford. And I think once we have heard back regarding those two items, which I think would be fairly quickly, we'll be able to set on a path of where we're going. I mean, obviously, if we can't move beds, then, we'll be looking to, assess hopefully the current Medicaid rate at Milford, knowing that we're going to have to decrease our beds by 50.
Can you explain a little bit at what it means to move beds for people that don't live in your world and may not understand?
Well, again, it would be done through attrition, but years ago, the beds were decertified at the Cheshire facility and Danbury. So Cheshire used to be 120 beds. It's now 85. So there's a whole unit that's available. So if transfer beds were an option, we could use those beds, and it wouldn't be creating any more newly certified Medicaid beds for Connecticut. And honestly, in the work we've looked at so far, I think Cheshire would be a more viable option than Danbury related to occupancy in the areas. So if
Okay,
that makes sense.
for that.
And Cheshire closer to Milford in terms of those
Yes,
families or folks.
and yes, and I mean, really, could we, not have to offer any disruption to the Milford residents if we do it by attrition? And then if we have the new beds at Cheshire, we could newly admit there versus Milford. Do you know what I mean? And then, of course, we'd have to accommodate for the loss at Milford, but hopefully there'd be the least disruption to the residents.
Yeah, Rep. Belinsky.
This is an interesting conversation. I'm not necessarily familiar with how the transfer of beds process works, but it, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we would go to to a resident or their family, and we would offer them a voluntary transfer from hypothetically from a 4-bedroom to a 2-bedroom, except it would be in Cheshire and not in I'm sorry, in whatever, I'm crossed up there. You know what I'm trying to say. Um, I in addition to the attrition, I would imagine that we're going to find some families and individuals who would welcome the opportunity to go to a 2-bedroom versus being in a 3 or 4, if it's presented to them correctly. Is that, am I guess I'm oversimplifying, but is that how the process could work?
I mean, absolutely, for residents' rights, we would, need their consent. Um, just to be clear, though, I'm not looking to transfer like every resident from Milford to Cheshire. We're
Right.
looking to transfer the available beds, or the beds that we're giving up at Milford. So
Mhm.
there may be no residents that want to transfer from Milford to Cheshire, or there could be 10. I don't know. But the whole transfer option would be, I believe, a waiver in itself. I mean, it's not something that we do in Connecticut, so I'm not even sure that it's going to be a viable option. That's why, we'll meet with DSS first, see, if they can, waive that critical access occupancy. And then I believe the next step would be to meet with DPH and then address if they would waive that, if DPH would be open to that option.
It seems to me that if we laid an attrition analysis on them, on those residents that we can't transfer because of personal preference, um, eventually attrition is going to take care of it as well. So that waiver doesn't appear to me to necessitate something permanent. It's just an extended period of of transfer based on the anticipated attrition rate that would happen around that in, those couple of beds. Because I don't, it seems to me like it's reasonable to leverage the attrition model.
Rep. Garabay,
Yes,
just to
Claudia.
clarify, because I think there may be two conceptual models of what it means to transfer here. I think what I hear Representative Belinsky saying is, wouldn't it be a cool way to make sure people who are currently in a 3 and 4 bed configuration to actually get prioritization in a newly established bed in a different facility? So potentially Cheshire, as opposed to where they currently are. And so that's one way of doing it. I don't hear the industry suggesting that. What I hear the industry suggesting is that they want to take the beds that are in a 4 bed configuration, full or not, and get credit for expanding capacity at a different facility. And there's no attachment or prioritization for someone in a 4 bedroom capacity to get that new bed. It could come, first served to anyone else being served in that new facility. So I don't think it will help accelerate people leaving 4 bed configurations. It's just a matter of adding new bed capacity to the facility.
Yeah.
Is that right? Can you help understand the two? Because Rep. Belinsky is saying that the individual would get the prioritization for that transferred bed being established at a new facility. Is that what you're suggesting? You would give prioritization to someone in your current facility that's at 4?
I mean, certainly that could be discussed and could be an option, but you're right. Conceptually, I was just talking about moving the beds.
Right. And that's, Claudio, thank you for being my interpreter. That exactly was what I was talking about. A voluntary process where somebody would welcome, a move that doesn't preclude their family being able to visit them, to have a better situation that they're living in. So thank you.
And if I could just further clarify from what Claudia is saying, I am better understanding that it is because the industry is losing X number of beds in Milford eventually. And so that's why they're looking to open new beds at that facility in Cheshire, basically for the economy of scale to be basically the same for them. I mean, am I correct there? I mean, it's an economic decision because you've lost beds to gain beds.
Yes.
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 Okay. And we understand that, and we're not.
And we're, like I said, we're just trying to minimize, and that's why the whole, architecture piece, instead of losing 50 beds, we'd only lose 24, and more residents would not have to be, or could be placed in a 2 bedroom right at the Milford facility.
Right.
There's a big difference. Yeah.
Thank
But
you.
yeah, we're trying not to lose those other beds.
Yep.
Correct.
Thank you. Anything else, Denise? I mean, you
don't-
can come back afterwards
Yeah,
if you
I
have
don't think
something
so.
else to.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Good morning, Michael Ploss with Eye Care Health Network. Sorry for the hoarse voice. Been getting through a sickness this week. We submitted, as Nicole mentioned, 2 of our 3 homes that are affected by the 3 and 4 bedroom issue, and immediately got a response acknowledging receipt. I appreciate that. Last meeting was enlightening to me that there's a lot of cooperation available from the state. So we immediately acted on it and got some proposals in. And we have a third one that we're evaluating now to see what we can do with that. I will mention on the Massachusetts issue, I'm pretty familiar with it. My company was brought in last month as a temporary manager for a state-appointed receivership for 6 of the plaintiffs in its 30 plaintiffs in Massachusetts on that case, and it's being settled. So we're more like an interested party. We're not a plaintiff. We're just managing the properties. And there's going to be a settlement. They're working on a settlement with the state now, where there's a waiver process, and it's connected to to occupancy in the area because of bed need issues. And that's the argument that the industry was making in that state, was that there's a bed need, and by eliminating the beds, it's going to create bed issues. So I just wanted to mention that. But again, we're supporting, iCare supports getting rid of 3 and 4 bedrooms. We're not a party to any kind of lawsuit.
Yes, thank you for that. And it is important to look how, if others before us have done something, to look at that, right? And to see who maybe didn't do it so well and who did it well, so that we can learn from that, so that our best practices are good. So I thank you for that.
I'm happy that we're not that we're not going down the route that Massachusetts went with the litigation.
Um, So is there something else that anyone wants to comment? But I'm excited about the progress, especially in the past 2 weeks and what came before that. How can we help reach out to them, Matt? I mean, how do we reach out to the others to offer the help? I'm assuming that you are doing that. Is there something we can do to help?
Yeah, thank you, Representative Garibay. There are 2 additional nursing companies in my group that are implicated with this, and we are meeting with them. Really, every meeting we have in this group includes those organizations, so they're fully abreast of the progress that these organizations are making by example. But it's my understanding from what's been represented in our internal meetings that both these organizations are moving forward similarly with plans, but I can't speak to whether or not they're actually these plans are actually in front of DSS or DPH in a specific way. But my understanding is there is dialogue going on from those organizations, and I think they're included in the bed count number that Barbara Cass had mentioned. And so, in our group, no one's being left behind, and they'd be here, I think, today. But I think we felt there was a want to just have industry representatives for this work group and not the entire implicated part of the industry. And and this whole dialogue is just extremely helpful, even on the issue of the bed transfers, because we do want to, have a common understanding. And to my own mind, it would take the Bristol situation. Civitas just purchased a building in Bristol, and Denise announced at the last meeting there were some situations where there were 3-bedroom configurations, and so ultimately there'll be a delicensed bed, I think, in Bristol. In other words, there will be that won't be a licensed 3-bedroom, if you will. That'll be a licensed 2-bedroom. And so, to Representative Fortis's very well made point, that's an economic loss for the facility. And if there's an opportunity to create that bed, in Cheshire or someplace else, it's not a net increase in the number of beds. It's kind of a wash in terms of the bed capacity. And I think that's important because we are at 90% or nearly 90% occupancy here in Connecticut. So just this conversation in an open way where we were able to clarify that, I think is really, really important. And in terms of the waivers, Denise had mentioned that there's a statutory prohibition from being able to transfer to another part of the state if that occupancy isn't below 97.2%. And that is a very high occupancy threshold. And in fact, the average occupancy is 90% or 89 point, very close to 90%. And so, this is why I mentioned the potential need for some sort of statutory notwithstanding clause or waiver, because that is a statutory provision. It's under 17B-355. And I respect that the agency might want to waive that, but that's challenged to waiver a statutory provision. But if you created a provision, not a requirement, a permissive authority for the commissioner to waive that section related to, then you could narrow it to, in compliance or as part of a plan to transition to 2-bedrooms, the commissioner shall have the authority to waive the 97%, 97.2% threshold. We wouldn't be blowing the whole system up. We would be creating a very narrow waiver exception that I think might be needed under the law.
Here. So
Right?
Yeah, and Nicole maybe wanted to speak on this, and it's timely because the agent committee has before it an agency proposal from DSS to start to throttle down that 97.5 and give a little more flexibility, recognizing there are pockets of the state. And I think it's very important that we distinguish statewide, we're at 89%, but there are some pockets of the state that are exceeding 90, 95+% occupancy. So our problem is not top level. At the high level, somewhere in Connecticut, we can find someone a bed. The challenge is when you look at small 15-mile radius communities on an individual basis. So I think that DSS's agency proposal gives some flexibility. I would caution against going too far in creating a waiver, because then we may be creating capacity where we don't need it. So the process as it currently is to really direct and target some of the needs to the local capacity so that people can stay close to home.
And I understand what you're saying, and I understand what we've done in the past statutorily. We are trying to make sure there are beds in all areas of the state, and that's what our current proposal hopes to do. In this case, though, I would support the idea of that narrow exception for companies that are cutting down their beds in facilities. For instance, in the case of Savita, with this Milford property that has the most 3 and 4 bedroom rooms in the state, and they have a facility in Cheshire. I guess what I'm saying is, if Cheshire happens to have plenty of beds, the current proposal that we have going, that might not be enough to give them that waiver in Cheshire. However, I would like to reward Savita for cutting down those 3 and 4 bedroom units. Do you understand what I'm saying? And giving them that narrow exception for beds in Cheshire.
Yeah, I think that the challenge is at the risk of not filling capacity at a part of the state that maybe has 99% capacity, though. And Savita may not have a home there. So now we've prioritized and brought online a new bed where we don't need a bed. And there's going to be no beds or no expansion in another part of the state that's more desperately in need. So I agree with you in sense of it's worth having a conversation about, but our process is very thoughtful in trying to make sure that the certificate of need process at DSS spreads out capacity so that we're targeting and pinpointing from a consumer and resident family perspective. Does the capacity exist? Not necessarily rewarding industry for being good actors. I mean, we need the capacity where families want it.
Understand. And I guess what I'm saying is, I don't think we would be abandoning our goal. We would just be supplanting a small waiver to do this as well. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to abandon the main goal. I definitely.
Thank you both, and I think this conversation has to continue. I don't think that's going to be fixed here and now, okay? But it is a good conversation and something that we should look at.
And Nicole wants to speak. So.
Yeah, it's an excellent
Nicole.
conversation. And when you think about the overall goal, from what I believe is an OPM standpoint, we as a state and as a society are transitioning slowly, like 1 or 2% a year towards aging in place programs anyway. So again, if we play the attrition, and give it some room to temporarily cover gaps in coverage so that we don't deny beds in a particular region or town or city, I see it as a matter that's addressable.
Thank you. Nicole.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Fortier, yes, you are correct in asking the question and posing the question around, Savita's concerns and some of the other concerns raised about the financial loss potentially is really what it comes down to. If I have X number of beds in this building, I'd like to move them there because there is viewed to be a financial attachment to those beds. And that's why I think when the 3 and 4 bedded room language was crafted, it acknowledged that, while also preserving our long-standing tradition here, as Representative Belinsky points out, in the state around our moratorium, so that we have right sizing and rebalancing efforts to ensure that people are aging in place, aging in their communities. Home and community-based services are preserved, while also making sure that we kind of dwindle the number of excess beds we have had historically here in the state. But we were, I think, pre-COVID, we were close to 7,000 excess beds in the state. It's very expensive for the state. It's a lot of excess capacity into the system. And through our right sizing rebalancing efforts, we've really done, I think, an exceptional job as a state to be better balanced. So to preserve all of those efforts and to also acknowledge some of the challenges that the industry may face in trying to transition the 3 and 4 bedded rooms, the language was thoughtful in section C of the language to allow the department to be able to make necessary adjustments to the Medicaid rate, to make those adjustments as homes need to do those transitions, whether it be construction costs or whether it be a recalculation of the rate based off of a new bed count. So there are those levers that we do have in place, and I think it was very thoughtfully well crafted when that language was designed. So again, we're happy to take a look at the proposals as they come forward, and then also try to balance our current moratorium, our exception to the moratorium that will be coming up, and the current right sizing rebalancing efforts that we have in place.
Okay, thank you for that, Nicole. I know it's something I'd like to learn a little bit more about. So I think this conversation's good, and I think we'll have to have a continuing conversation, maybe not in a formal format, but to continue with that. Is there anything else?
Yes, just to further respond to your initial question, what more do we think we could do? And I won't raise these issues for the purpose of trying to settle them, but and they have
Right.
come up. But and the industry recognizes that you can't have complete certainty, but they were looking for, I think, some signal if they were to start investing in architectural design work, which can be very costly. And they were looking at plans that might actually involve a renovation that closed a wing and required the temporary transfer and discharge of residents in a closed wing while renovations were occurring to bring 4 bedrooms into 2 bedrooms or 3 to 2. That we're looking for some sort of signal that there would be acknowledgement that that's a significant financial loss during those periods of time that would be incurred in compliance with transitioning to 2 bedrooms. Again, not to settle the issue, but I think there was a dialogue that DSS was acknowledging, yeah, that this could be very costly, and they were open to considering proposals that had those sorts of features to them. And I think some of those things could be waivers rather than the need for a narrow permissive authority for the commissioner to approve the occupancy percentage standard under the law right now. And so I just want to raise that issue and finally the issue of sometimes the deadlines may need to be waived because the nursing homes are waiting for municipal approvals that are not actually under the state's jurisdiction, and wanting to get sort of an openness about, yeah, those would be reasonable reasons provided the nursing homes could show good faith moving forward, and that the sort of ball was someplace else waiting for a final decision. But again, not to settle all those issues right now, but perhaps just to raise them for, to show that there are complicating issues that might need to be settled as we move forward, Representative.
Thank you for that. So I believe that we are all sitting here having this conversation because we care about our elderly people. We care about where they age and that they age with dignity, the best health we can help them with, and all the needs. So it is my expectation, and I think I speak for the aging committee, is that the groups will work together for the best possible outcome, and anything as the aging committee we can do to help facilitate that. But it seems like especially in the last 2 weeks, you are all working together. You may not all agree on everything right now or whatever, and there may be some things you don't agree on. But if we can meet in the middle on some of these items, and so we will leave that up to these two parties to, well, more DPH, DSS, whoever is involved, to continue the good work that you're doing and your representation in time of your industry to pull that together. And the only other thing I wanted to say before I forget is, do we have a plan to reach out to facilities that are not represented by Mr. Barrett or other organizations that may be just individual? Do they know about what they can do? And that may not be able to be answered today either. I don't know.
So we can go back, Representative Garabay, to DPH and talk about messaging or communication that we can
And they
do.
may be doing it and we just
Yeah,
don't know it,
yes.
you know? So
But we can talk about a plan at DPH, what we can do to do outreach with the facilities, at least that we've identified. Or we could do an all industry message that encompasses through our Everbridge message system.
Yeah, and I would just add that I think that probably needs to be a collaborative effort between DSS and DPH, given DPH doesn't have any resources to offer, but just more guidance on new statute regulations, et cetera. So we'll discuss with our partners at DSS the best way to do that, and if there's an appropriate way to do that.
yeah, we'll leave those details to you guys on how you do that. So it'd be good to know that everyone has received notice, et cetera. So that would be a good thing. So again, I'll reiterate, we're all here for our elderly people. We want them to age in whichever way they choose in a good situation, and that includes our nursing facilities, long-term care, et cetera. Rep. Belinsky.
I thank you very much, Jane. Um, the one part of that the last conversation we just had that I want to put an exclamation point on is we are dealing with in many cases medically fragile individuals. So anything we can do that minimizes anything that would even appear to be an involuntary transfer is of great interest to us. I believe. I can't speak for everybody, but I can speak for myself. You know, we recognize and want to continue to recognize hardship that could occur also to the folks that are charged with caring for folks that would be involved in that decision making. As long as the family or the individual are engaged, and it doesn't lead to something that turns into a litigious matter on that level, I would view everything as being a matter of agreement that we pursue. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any last comments before we adjourn?
Just to thank you once more for the environment and spotlight that you put on this issue. We are very grateful to you, and we will take your call or your guidance to heart, and we will continue to meet with the agency with jurisdiction, cognizance over these issues, and report back to you on the progress over the next month or so.
That would be awesome. And I do believe that we have awesome people around the table from both, and that we should be able to work out most of these things. Again, we may not agree on everything, but we can agree on some things. So I appreciate, are there any other further comments from anyone? No? Seeing none, we're going to adjourn, and thank you everyone for being here on this happy Friday.
Thank you, everybody.